It's 5 o'clock, so we'll start. Thank you for attending. Apologies and leave of absence. We have the Lord Mayor, Anna Reynolds, Councillor John Kelly, Deputy Lord Mayor Dr. Zinina Sherlock, and Councillor Will Coates. Confirmation of minutes. Someone would like to move. Councillor Basalt. All in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Number 2, consideration of supplementary items.
Sorry. What minutes are we approving, Bill?
These are the...
we haven't seen them. Should we defer that to the next meeting?
Sorry, my apologies. Good pick up. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Greatly appreciated. So I note the point that was made by Alderman Zuko, and I think it's a valid point, and I thank you for that. Consideration of supplementary items? No. Number 3, indications of pecuniary and conflict of interests? No. Number 4, transfer of agenda items? No. Number 5, planning authority, consideration of items with deputation, there being none. Number 6, we are now acting as planning authority under Rule 25. 6.1.1. Questions, queries? Someone would like to move the recommendation? Move. Thank you, Councillor.
There were no representations. I was curious about a couple of the conditions with regard to soil and contaminated soil on the site, which I thought was good. Is that an innovation we've just put in, or have we always had that for sensitive areas like Fern Tree?
Through you, Chair, those conditions, I asked that very same question myself. The biodiversity code applies, and so there's that extra layer of protection for ensuring that weeds are minimised on site. So that's why we have recommended those conditions.
Okay. And how do we verify that? What do they need to provide? What does the contractor need to provide to demonstrate that they have complied with that condition? So this is across all contractors that come and go from the site.
Through you, Chair. We do some limited proactive checking of these sorts of things, but to an extent we are reliant on the applicant to do what we've asked them to do. I mean, we can't be everywhere all the time making sure that people have comply with these sorts of conditions, but and there's nothing in here about submitting a plan, for example, to be endorsed by the council. But yeah, it's like many of these construction management processes, we approve them and then expect that they will be complied with.
Yeah, yep. I guess one way of looking at that, of how you would check, is to see what sort of weeds show up post-construction, because disturbing the soil and having trucks and vehicles come and go. And I know one example, and they won the Biosecurity Award last year for their practices at their property, where they require, and they've got a lot of services that run through their property, and they require the the service providers, Tas Networks, Tas Water, whoever else has access to their property, to provide a slip that they've been to the car wash basically, and they've cleaned their trucks prior to entering their property. So they've got to have a dated slip before this person will allow any vehicles. It's a heritage high conservation value property, and no one enters the property without having a slip that says their vehicle's been thoroughly cleaned at a registered car wash, not just a hose down around the corner, but they've actually got to get a slip for it. This is just for your information, I guess, going forward, because if we are, this particular area I know quite well, and there's been a lot of work done over a number of years to eradicate weeds all through Fern Tree, and this particular area has had a great deal of effort and energy put into it over time. And I'd hate to think, that we do, there's another outbreak of certain things because of the hygiene of contractors coming into the area. So there's a bigger picture here with how do we enforce, or how do we rely on the contractors, and as well as the owner or the project manager, to make sure there's compliance. But that's just a comment for tonight. But I'm supportive of the project going ahead. Yep.
Councillor Basalt.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to the Director. I know that the reason that this has come to committee is because there's work on council lands. I was just wondering if you can tell us what the extent of the work on council land is that's triggered it to come to committee.
Through you, Chair, it's to do with the stormwater infrastructure and its interaction with the pipeline track.
A follow-up question, would connections to stormwater going through a road easement usually trigger a committee?
Through you, Chair, we, as officers, we have delegation for applications that relate to road reservation, so no. This is not part of the road reservation, so that's why this one has come to you.
A second question, Chair, through you. The assessment under the Historic Heritage Code, I was a bit interested as to why there was comment passed on the built form of this building, which I'll let you pass comment on rather than just asking a question, but also the condition around sandstone finishes on the stormwater, the very small section of stormwater under the pipeline. I was just wondering if there's rationale for that, as we know that heritage codes almost universally say don't use identical materials because you won't be able to differentiate old from new, and yet that's exactly what we've done here. So is there further comments that you'd like to make on those two things?
Through you, Chair, so in terms of the heritage assessment of the built form, the Heritage Code applies and that analysis had to be done. This application is a little bit, or quite unusual in my mind, in that it triggers an assessment under the cultural landscape precinct, so that the pipeline is something that in my time at council, I'm not aware of another application that's had works interacting with the pipeline track. While I agree with you in the sense that there's a general proposition when assessing heritage that you don't imitate the heritage fabric or form, that's not actually articulated in the planning scheme, and that doesn't extend to say that the converse is true, that you must always use modern materials so that there's a direct contrast, I guess. And in this instance, the applicant themselves have identified that the use of natural stone, so there is a condition that we have imposed for that to be done, but it's not really doing anything more than locking them into the documentation they've already provided.
Any other questions, any other comments? No, well, I'll put that recommendation. All in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. 7.1, we have with us Philip and Jennifer. So if you have any questions with regard to the medium density design guidelines and improving residential standards in Tasmania, I'm sure they'll be able to respond to your questions.
I'm happy to.
No, you're right. Go. You were.
I'm happy to move the item. And just pass comment that it is excellent to see movement in this space. We know, and we've seen some public discourse this week, we know how important it is to make sure that medium density has appropriate living standards to ensure that we get more people living in the city, which will be good for everyone. So thanks to all of the staff involved. And I know this is only our submission, but I look forward to seeing the guidelines passed in Parliament when that occurs.
Councillor Lohberger and then Councillor Bill Harvey.
Question through you, Chair. I'm not sure who to. I noticed that there's been a lot of talk around these guidelines regarding the unit development, the social housing development at the bottom of Golden Street that runs between Golden Street and I think St Harrington Street, which is a fantastic development. But it is reasonably low rise and it's quite compatible with the surrounding housing mix. I was just wondering what our thoughts are on height when it comes to medium density, whether there's height limits or what is our line when it comes to height for these medium density developments, if it exists in this document.
Thank you, Chair. I might defer to Ms Lawley, if that's okay, to respond to that question.
Yeah. Just to clarify, you're talking about the guidelines specifically? Yep. So the guidelines have the definition of a spectrum of housing types that would fit under that definition, and it's the definition that we support as we help put this together. It's a mid-rise apartment up to 6 stories. And that's how we've generally been structuring the neighbourhood plans as well. Anything above 6 stories is really starting to push into what is, by definition, more of the high-rise apartments. Yep.
So would we be, just through the chair, would we be talking about sort of this height limit in existing residential neighbourhoods?
No, so this doesn't propose any changes to height limits. This is a non-statutory document. It's really to enhance and provide guidance on what is good design within the current planning scheme that's applicable. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thanks for the clarification. Councillor Harvey and then Alderman Broomfield.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Through you, I was hoping we could get a brief description, just a brief understanding of the submission that the council is putting forward. That's for anyone listening online might be interested in hearing about the submission. If we could just get the officers to give us a brief overview of their submission, of our submission.
So, Phil, or do you want to?
Thank you, Chair. I think Ms Lawley or perhaps Mr Holliday, the Acting Director, might... sorry, Jen, could you move your microphone a bit closer? Just so...
All right. I'll start with the guidelines. I guess in a nutshell, and I won't talk for too long, but if there's anything you want me to particularly reference, our general comments have been one of supporting and welcoming the work that's been undertaken through the guidelines. It's important to note we've had officers, including myself, involved in multiple workshops with the state government and other councils and other agencies in the preparation of the design guidelines, and we found the process to be very collaborative and insightful. And the guidelines itself is just one of those many documents that we need, amongst many, to help deliver better outcomes for the community and more design-sensitive outcomes. I think, to be specific, it was picked up by UDAP and by us that some of the housing topologies that are shown throughout the document really lean towards terrace housing and very low density housing. I think that is to account for the fact that this is a statewide policy, but it does in essence refer to it being something that they wish to see more in Greater Hobart. So based on that, we'd like to see a few more good examples of what we would classify as low-rise apartment blocks that we obviously support and see a lot of coming through here. So we've reflected that in our feedback. There was some comments from technical officers around context analysis and some definitions, site structure, but on the whole, we're very supportive. Some of the concepts would benefit from clearer diagrams. They've been simplified for the purposes of having a wide audience, but in some cases we think the oversimplification might lead to some poorer outcomes or misunderstandings. We've also recommended that relevant codes be referenced within the document, particularly around the land slip hazard code and a few other things like that, that could really impact on what the design ultimately looks like. And that would really, I think, strengthen the document to have everything there that people know what to refer to at a state level. Local provisions are separate, but those state codes would benefit. We also tried to make sure we filled out the survey questions. And that reflects everything I've said, and that we find that the guidelines practical to use with just the suggestions that I've sort of mentioned, and that we encourage developers to engage professional consultants early on. There was a question there around barriers to delivering more housing, and we've made the note that there is some scaling issues in Tasmania that we are aware of, that a lot of Tasmanian builders are only qualified or insured up to 2 stories. So that's an issue there that we've also identified that needs to be continually addressed in the delivery of medium density. So that's the medium design density guidelines. Then you have the improving residential standards. The fact that they were both put on exhibition at the same time has meant that it is a lot of work to get your head around. They wanted to do that on purpose so that you can refer to each because they are supposed to be connected in that way. But yeah, just bear with me. So our submission for improving residential standards, we reflected the structure of the document and put our feedback into the sections. So section 1, the development standards, section 2 is about subdivision controls, and section 3 is around implementation. The development standards we've been involved in through the technical reference group. So one of my team, one of our strategic planners, has been a part of this process for quite a number of years now. And we support the introduction of the plot ratio controls. We support the introduction of more appropriate building envelope controls to support the types of housing we wish to see. And we've noted that we certainly agree with their all of the sections of the papers that talk to how the inner residential zone hasn't delivered the sort of density that it intended to do. And so a lot of this is to address some of those issues that we've seen in the last 20 years. So setback controls, we've provided some feedback around setback controls that we think are more appropriate, and that's around making sure that we have a minimum of 3 metres to the rear boundaries to have deeper soil and better outcomes for adjoining residents. We've supported the private open space and common open space controls with some questions to them around some of them. Some of the minimum requirements haven't necessarily aligned with anything else, so we've just questioned that. And the solar access controls are so pivotal to creating good amenity for neighbouring dwellings, and they're something that we strongly support being put back into the planning scheme. Subdivision standards, whilst we're not highly impacted by the subdivision standards, we've had excellent technical advice come in from our stormwater leads and our other units at council. So we've put quite detailed feedback in that section. So we obviously support having the reintroduction of a stormwater code, but we've written some quite technical responses back in regards to some of the provisions that they had suggested for this subdivision standard. So you can have a look at that in further detail. The implementation framework, we had a meeting with the SBO who are delivering the residential standards work, and the 3 options that were put forward, we interrogated with them, and we've put in our submission that we support option 1, which is essentially introducing these revised residential standards into the existing zones. It's the most effective and easiest way to implement. The option 2 was considering a whole new approach of new zones and revised spatial alignments of zones across the whole state. That's a huge project, it wasn't really set out as in how you could achieve that. So we weren't sure that that was an extra layer of complication that would see these residential standards not being delivered in a suitable amount of time. And we would love to see this continue as quickly as possible. Option 3 talks about the improvements through codes, and we've put in our submission that we strongly support the introduction of an apartment code, which would bring us in line with all the other states, as well as the stormwater code. And we've hesitated on supporting a medium density code because we think by updating the residential standards, you'll get the same effect. But apartment dwellings do require quite robust provisions to ensure a good high amenity in tall apartment blocks. And we've seen the delivery of much better units in terms of livability standards, particularly in New South Wales, who've had the code the longest, and we've seen better results being built as a result of that. Okay, so we've stepped out our preferred implementation methodology at the back. We've also supported guidelines on bicycle parking. We've also mentioned visitor accommodation, and we've written some words around inclusionary zoning. So all of these things we welcome further discussions with the SBO on. So.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer.
Chairman, that was a fantastic presentation. I think that summarised things really well for us. I'm supportive of the work that's been done. I commend the officers for the work they've brought to us.
Anyone else? Any other? Councillor Kitson. Oh, sorry, my apologies.
I was curious regarding the parking, because these developments are not really single bedroom places, are they? They're 2 and 3 bedrooms, is that correct?
Sorry.
Medium density housing, it talked about that there was only going to be allowance for 1 car park per accommodation. And I'm assuming that that's not for a single bedroom accommodation, that's per accommodation, as in if there's 8 apartments, there'll be 8 car parks.
Are you referring to the standards?
I believe so. It was in the back of this. It was talking about bikes, as you said, and it talked about car access as well. 7.1, page 179, attachment B.
Page 179.
Oh, she's talking about that. Okay. Yep. But I'm just trying to find the relevant section in the actual improving residence.
Yeah, so then it went on somewhere else to say, it's considered that 1 car parking space per dwelling. Now, per dwelling, I'm assuming is per 1 bedroom or a 2 bedroom or a 3 bedroom place, right? So firstly, we're going to have a whole lot of families moving into these places, but only allowed to have 1 car. No visitors will have access anywhere unless it's on the street. And the other thing is, will the council still be issuing permits for people to have road parking space like we do already at the moment in West Hobart and North Hobart? Do you know what I mean? If you live on Patrick Street, if you live on Newdigate Street, you don't have a carport, that you can apply and get a permit that allows you to park out the front without looking at the restrictions.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so is there a limit on how many people, how many per household can you do? I think it was 2.
I think that's probably right. We have 2 pieces of work here. One is obviously the guidelines which have been issued, like draft guidelines which have been issued by the state government. The other one is obviously the city's own parking provisions, and obviously I think the council may have endorsed our curbside management strategy, and I know that gives consideration to further work around how we may provide parking amenity and permits to residential areas. So 2 pieces of work, obviously ours, which is dealing with that on a local government level, and obviously then there are some a proposed approach to provide 1 car parking space per dwelling for medium density, which is included, I understand, in the draft standards.
Okay, so it's in terms of the car parking reductions, it's looking at the rates in regards to developments less than 400 metres walking distance of an activity centre, to require only 1 site car parking bay for every dwelling within 400 metres of an activity centre. Further reductions could also be considered under a permitted pathway where supplementary private car parking with a shared car parking scheme. And then it goes on to explain what has been done in other states, which would be bringing us into in line with that. But it's basically here we go, development inside or within, from a centre or high-frequency transit corridor. It's proposed that 1 on-site parking space per dwelling plus 1 visitor space for every 10 bedrooms. Social housing, 0.7 on-site parking spaces per dwelling plus 1 visitor space for every 10. And development operating a car share scheme, 1 shared on-site parking space for every 5 dwellings. This is the potential parking reductions it's considering, but it's only within the 400 metres of an activity centre or high-frequency transit corridor. So, which is how it's, well, yeah, that's how we've generally been looking at parking exemptions as well when we look at approvals.
Yep.
So with this this high transit area, do we actually have any, given that we don't really have a very good bus system right now?
We have high-frequency transit corridors. When they refer to that, they are talking about the main corridor as it stands in terms of the how we get regular buses from Glenorchy down into the city, and Sandy Bay Road is also seen as a high-frequency transit corridor, and of course over to the east as well. So.
Any other question, follow-up question? Alderman Bluefield? Any other?
Sorry, I thought you stopped me. Look, it was mostly, I was just curious because if we don't have good provision for visitor parking, it's assuming that people who will visit them will have to be from the same area within walking distance, which will immediately isolate the vulnerable, the elderly, implying that either they have to get in a car and go and visit their children, but their children will struggle to get to come and see them. Those things, I think, are really material. And also, it's a fallacy to think that if a 3-bedroom dwelling we'll have two productive adults who will likely need a car each because one probably works in one area and one works in another area. You don't commonly see a lot of families have one car. A lot of us would love to have one car, but it's not actually feasible. So it just concerns me that what we're going to see by reducing it this way there'll be a lot of extra pressure on street parking for those who have that extra car, who don't have the space, who have visitors who want to come but don't have the space because the 1 per 10 houses, too bad if there's 2 visitors for 10 houses. We're going to get a lot more clag in the parking on the street. So I'm not sure if it's necessarily a net positive because we simply don't have the alternative being our public transport to the state it needs to be to actually know that people can genuinely get on a bus and visit these people, or these people can get on a bus and actually get to work on time. That's a real problem. We have a staff member at the moment who car broke down. They're not relying on public transport, they're relying on cabs. It's the only way they know they can guarantee to get work on time. And we're in a high transit area, but no guarantee for them to get to work on time. So I just feel that it's commendable, but it's not yet realistic given what we simply don't have. And there won't be any substantial changes in the bus services that we know of, because when Minister Abetz mentioned it, the first change that we will see will be in 2026. And that won't be a substantial change, that'll just be a modest change. So we are 5 and 10 years out from this actually being something that I think will work for us. That's what worries me. I mean, it'll be great when it does, but I fear that we're going to create pain for families who simply won't necessarily have the choices that they need. That's all.
Thank you. Councillor Kitsos.
Oh, look, I just wanted to say thank you for that really detailed explanation of what it is that we're looking at here tonight. I do have to turn to face the microphone, so excuse me. But I really like that we're looking at improved living standards for people in apartments, and I think it's absolutely essential across all areas that Tasmania keeps in line and keeps up to date with the other states and territories around the country. I also wanted to just give a nod to the amount of work that it must be to write a submission like this, to thoroughly answer it all, and really appreciate the complexity of the issues that we're dealing with. So thank you to the officers for helping us to understand this detailed work tonight.
Councillor Harvey.
Oh, just a comment on car parking in multi-residential units, and I'm just having a quick Google, but I recall reading a lot of, or not a lot, examples in Melbourne, for example, where I don't want to make up the figure, but I probably might have to. You know, it's like half the car parks are never occupied because people don't need a car because they live so close to the city. So there's a choice to deliberately not own cars when you live very close to all the amenities. And I can't remember what the figure was exactly, but it was quite significant how many empty car parks there are in multi-residential tenancies in other cities. So the notion that we're going to need, you know, 2 car parks for 2 bedrooms or 3 car parks for 3 bedrooms, I don't think worries me, because I don't think people living in the city require a car as much as those who need to travel to the city. So, you know, 1 car park per residential tenancy, if that's the standard for the residential apartments within 400 metres of a, you know, travel centre or transit node, or, you know, whatever the terminology was, seems adequate to me. So I don't discount what you're saying. However, I think from my reading, it hasn't been an issue in other cities.
Thank you. Point taken. Councillor Passon.
Sorry, Chair. Just to follow up with a very simple question. The minimum car parking standards, should they be adopted, doesn't preclude developers from putting in 2 spaces per development, does it?
That's correct.
So if there is a, I guess I'll pass this as comment, but if there is a need and desire and a market-driven bent towards having more car parking to sell apartments because for whatever reason, the community, the family, whatever, they want 2 cars, then I'm sure we'll see the market respond to that. But car parking minimums is what leads to, you know, broad acre car parking developments around shopping centres, the destruction of a whole lot of green fabric of any city. And if you want to see examples of car parking minimums used extremely poorly, go and look at places like Detroit in America. But those areas are those rules are what leads to actually really poor outcomes. But in the residential setting, the market can respond. We're just saying you don't need to provide this. However, if you want to, go for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I take it, Councillor Passon, you have already moved this recommendation.
I have.
Is it right? Thank you very much. Now, I put the recommendation. Those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much,
Sorry,
everybody.
I didn't say aye, I put my hand up. So, I'm against it, so thank you.
Okay, so no, it's okay. That's fine. We will take that again, please. So those in favour? Hands up, please.
Turco, Councillor Purcell, Councillor Kitsos, Councillor Oberger, Councillor Hahn, and Councillor Dunn.
And against? Thank you. It's carried. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Jennifer and Philip, for your contribution. Thank you. 7.2 delegated decision reports.
So moved.
Moved. Any questions? No. No questions. Okay, I put the all in favour. The against carried unanimously. 7.3. Pending advertised applications moved by Councillor Passon. Any questions? Any questions? Question?
Also, to the Director, item number 2, 155, 147, 167 Liverpool Street, change of use to hotel industry. I'm pretty curious about this one. This seems to be the Hanging Garden, and I'm curious as to what the zoning or what the use was prior, and if this is... can we have some background?
If I may.
Sorry, I'll defer to Mr. Smee on this one.
So through the chair, fortunately that is one of my applications. This is to turn the cafe on the corner of the walkway through to the Hanging Gardens, to turn that cafe into it'll be a sort of small scale late night music venue is my understanding, with a sort of an emphasis upon having a really good sound system and playing quality music is sort of my understanding. So,
and supplementary question. So that's 155, I think. Is 147 to 167 still the same premises change, or is that in addition, or is it just a single? Because there's 3 addresses listed.
Through the chair, yeah, the application is just limited to that, what is now currently a cafe. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions, queries? No? Okay, I'll put that recommendation received and noted. All in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Questions without notice? No? Someone would like to move number 9. Moved. Those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much.